Got me out of all my dark place. How you divine and good, I think about you all day. Stay on my mind, you'll never leave me in the wrong place. I wasted your time, I wanna go back to the last day, but can never rewind. You got me burned out of the next. I was pissed on myself, I know I shut you out, girl. Cause I feel when you left me, I'm so grateful you so sweet. Cause you helped me prevent, they put this blessing down on me. So you helped when I feel. And never give you my all, cause I be knowing it was times like you don't get called. I'ma make it up to you. I'ma make it all up to you. And I've been trying all alone. I'll be hurting and I'm praying that you give me in this song. I'ma make it up to you. I'ma make it all up to you. As soon as I found myself going deep, knew that I was losing you and you was losing me. I reminisce on all the things that you taught me. I wanna take you back and say that I'm so sorry for all the pain I know I caused inside. For all the hurt I know I made you cry. And it just gets worse when I look in your eyes. And you don't want me to lose this fight. See, I was down, no, no, no. I let you down, no, no, no. What goes around till it all falls. And I just wanna please you now when you ain't someone else. Found you when I needed you the most. Put me out, yeah, you helped me save my soul. Said you the best and I just had to let you know. And you the best and I just had to let you know. Since the day I let you down, I made it my mission to turn around and do a smile. I'ma make it up to you. I'ma make it all up to you. Yeah. And never choose to let you down. My heart been thinking I'm gonna make you all let this down. I'ma make it up to you. I'ma make it all. Shalom, shalom, everyone. It is a grand, blessed, bright, and sunny day. Hope everyone is doing well. Thanks for tuning in again today with me, your most humble sister ChayaFyah, just here to edify the nation with some love and abundance of wisdom. The song that you heard just now was Sister Keetra, A Call to Wisdom. You can find that in the playlist on SoundCloud, the Hebrew Truth Music Network. So today, I just want to talk about the new moon, which most just acknowledged over the weekend, Sunday, I believe. But with all this information that we have out here today in the world, I continue to see so much confusion, especially within the community. But in my personal view, I continue to see things very simply. I don't think things should be as hard as people make them, but people do what they want. But it seems like in this thing called the truth, there are so many lies and deceits, surrounding this quote unquote true holy grail, so to speak. So in looking to find the creator's truth, I continue to study daily and seek his wisdom and not man's. So many questions throughout our congregation's camps and our peoples in regards to what really is and what really isn't. So my goal is to try to help to lead those around me, to the whole complete truth, the truth of simplicity and righteousness. So in this study today, I just want to find out, what the moon means to us as a whole. Why do we have these days where we acknowledge the moon cycles appearing and disappearing? So I'm going to be reading a little bit from different sources, including the Bible, Apocrypha, Talmud, and other sources. And we want to make sure that we are also using the correct calendars as well as honoring the correct times and find out why we are doing these things. So this is the new moon around the world. So I'm going to start with some scriptures from the Bible. Let me share my screen. Okay, so this is from the website ironsharpeningiron.com. Scriptures on new moons. So Numbers 10 and 10, Numbers 10, 10, 9 through 11. Also, at your times of rejoicing, your appointed feasts and new moon festivals, you are to sound the trumpets over your burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, and they will be a memorial for you before your God. I am the Lord your God. Numbers 28, 14 and 13 through 15. With each bull, there is to be a drink offering of half a hin of wine, with the ram, a third of an hin, and with each lamb, a quarter of an hin. This is the monthly burnt offering to be made at each new moon during the year. 1 Samuel 20 and 5. So David said, "Look, tomorrow is the new moon festival, and I am supposed to dine with the king. But let me go and hide in the field until the evening of the day after tomorrow." 1 Samuel 20:18. Then Jonathan said to David, "Tomorrow is the new moon festival. You will be missed because your seat will be empty." 1 Samuel 20:24. So David hid in the field, and when the new moon festival came, the king sat down to eat. Questions I would be asking is everybody celebrating the new moon at this time? What king was it that he was celebrating with? So that was King Saul. Okay. So 2 Kings, "Why go to him today?" he asked. "It's not the new moon or the Sabbath." "It's all right," she said. 1 Chronicles, "And whenever burnt offerings were presented to the Lord on Sabbaths and at new moon festivals and at appointed feasts, they were to serve before the Lord regularly in the proper number and in the way prescribed for them." 2 Chronicles, "Now I am about to build a temple for the name of the Lord my God and to dedicate it to him for burning fragrant incense before him, for setting out the consecrated bread regularly, and for making burnt offerings every morning and evening and on Sabbaths and new moons and at the appointed feast of the Lord our God. This is a lasting ordinance for Israel." And a lot of people do not keep the new moon. Another one in 2 Chronicles, "According to the daily requirement for offerings commanded by Moses for Sabbaths, new moons, and the 3 annual feasts, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles." And I'm going to just skip down to the next one. "On the Sabbaths and new moons, the people of the land are to worship in the presence of the Lord at the entrance of the gateway. And on the day of the new moon, he is to offer a young bull, 6 lambs, and a ram, all without defect." And this is when Israel was going off, I guess. "I will stop all her celebrations, her yearly festivals, her new moons, her Sabbath days, all her appointed feasts. They are unfaithful to the Lord. They give birth to illegitimate children. Now their new moon festivals will devour them and their fields. When will the new moon be over, that we may sell grain, and the Sabbath be ended, that we may market wheat, skimping the measure, boosting the price, and cheating with dishonest scales?" And the last one, therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. Okay, let me go to this article that I have up. This is an article by the creatorscalendar.com. New moon, by new moon you shall keep, Isaiah 66, 22 through 23. Discover in the context of this interlinear Hebrew word study that the true new moon lunar phase is revealed in 4 ways as 4 separate yet cohesive witnesses. Ascertain the ageless protocol Yah's obedient followers are to use to locate their Sabbaths currently and into eternity. Remarkably, the timekeeping principles of the future reign of our Messiah are no different than those implemented at creation and remain perpetual today as they are synchronized between earth and the New Jerusalem by way of the true new moon. For according to its abundance, no, sis, I'm not in the ISUPK. For according to its abundance, new moon by new moon you shall keep, Isaiah 66, 22 through 23. Sabbath and new moon, or Rosh Chodesh, both periodically recur in the course of the year. The new moon is still, and the Sabbath originally was dependent upon the lunar cycle. Originally, the new moon was celebrated in the same way as the Sabbath. That's from the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia, Holidays, Volume 5, page 410. For thousands of years, the entire world has been spoon-fed artificial time measuring methods and empty new moons crafted by the ancient Babylonians and their rabbinical Pharisee followers that are 180 degrees opposite of the ordained way of the Most High. This is further driven by the egregious changes made in all the translations of Scripture that serve to cover up that every mention of the month always refers to a lunar month. In spite of this, Yah's true followers, those who seek the truth with all their hearts and obey, will be restored and come forth triumphant from earth's dark pit of deception into his kingdom and marvelous full light of truth. Perspective on Isaiah 66, 22 through 23. These multi-dimensional verses are portrayed by the modern translations, have carried much weight in the circles I have lived in for the first 50 years of my life. These verses established that the Sabbath was more than a commandment from which many denominational churches could not dismiss as unnecessary. As they proceeded to sweep each commandment one by one under the proverbial rug, it was a useful proof text because in most of the modern translations, these verses identified the Sabbath as existing into the future when the earth would be restored or made new, and so established the Sabbath as relevant and binding today as well. I recall as a child between the ages of 8 and 10, the first time reading this verse and being stunned by the concept of worshiping from one new moon to another. Up to that point, my only connection to the concept of the new moon was through watching the TV show Daniel Boone. His Indian friend, played by Ed Ames, on at least one occasion spoke about meeting up with Daniel Boone on the new moon. But when I asked the adults about the new moon in Isaiah, they were quick to dismiss this as of no great importance, but emphasized that the Sabbath only was to be kept throughout all eternity with no connection to the moon. Even then, this did not sit well with me because the verse plainly identified the same future significance was applied to the new moon as to the Sabbath. So for years, I stored up a huge question mark in my mind about the truth of these two verses in Isaiah. As it appeared, the new moon and the Sabbath were to be eternally intertwined. Perhaps some of you have had a similar experience. All these years later, the truth was finally realized by degrees as I was able to accept the reality that the Creator's unique time measuring mechanism in the Chime, or heavens, announcing years, lunar months, the count of 4 weeks, and the lunar phase demarcation of days from 1 to 29 or 30, is predominantly based upon the moon. Together with the stars by night, the full moon rules along the east-west time continuum when the sun is not present. Many voices continue to scoff and seek to dismiss the significance of the ordained full new moon, number 2320 Kodesh, as being nothing more than a description of a Roman month. But the truth is that Kodesh, the first day of the month, in the same way, there are always two ends of a string of 30 pearls. As illustrated in this Hebrew word study, the reference materials identify Kodesh as one of three things. 1, the new moon lunar phase. 2, the first day of a lunar month. Or 3, a lunar month. But never does Kodesh refer to a solar month, as is popularly presumed today. Try as one might, the new moon can never be removed from the lunar month any more than an end can be removed from a rope, stick, or measuring device. Far and away, the mass majority of folks who read this article will be tempted to dismiss the evidence for the simple reason that it does not support their current views. But the truth be told, if it was found in these two verses that the sun, dark lunar phase, or crescent were identified as the Creator's preeminent guiding light or true new moon, at least the modern Jews, Messianics, and Hebrew roots folks would be shouting it from the mountaintops. So, to be honest and utterly fair, let these two verses speak for themselves in their Hebrew mother tongue, revealing the unadulterated truths originally intended from the mouth of the Eternal, Yah Elohim. The surest barrier to advancing truth is the conviction one already has it. If you are currently participating in a calendar style maintained or embraced by the Pope, other religious leaders, including Ellen White, or seemingly inspired writings such as the Book of Enoch, which utterly ignore the new moon of our Creator for his lunar months and the start of years, then you have been deceived. This includes nearly every one of us at one time of our lives. Revelation 13:3 tells us that all the world wondered after the beast. And all the world will receive the mark of the beast, except those who obediently keep the Torah law of Yah and exalt the testimony, sacred feast days, prophetic assemblies unto salvation of Yah, the Messiah. Revelation 12:17. The Torah law outlines all Yah's Kodesh, or sacred days, and the Messiah's fulfillment of each of the first ones in real time. Each of his feast day testimonies are proactively met according to the true full new moon. It is these set-apart feast days that declare our Messiah's testimony by the Ruach of prophecy in every detail from first to last, Revelation 19:10. For the Messiah is the Alpha and Omega, the Aleph and Tav, the first and last of our salvation, Revelation 1:8. By obediently keeping the set-apart feast days, we participate from first to last as witnesses and the redeemed in the salvation mechanism of restoring mankind back to the image of the Eternal Father. In this way, we affirm that the Messiah prophecies are true and that he is returning soon. The fact that you are still alive provides you the opportunity to turn it all around before it's too late. As you read through these fatal errors of the modern translations of Isaiah 66:22 through 23, and the article in general, please refer often to the Hebrew word study table, as this is the crux of the whole matter. Fatal errors in the King James translation of this text, it will be illustrated here that these verses were proactively and purposefully turned upside down and inside out to hide Yah's true moon and lunar Sabbath calendar model. So the first fatal error found in verse 22 is number 834, Asher. Here, only the prefix was utilized and not the word itself. While this is acceptable on occasion, it needed to be mentioned as so many things in these verses were changed. The translators could have utilized whereas, but this would cause the verse to lose the context they were resolutely looking for. The second fatal error found in verse 22 illustrates that the word order was rearranged so to place the word new 2319 Kadesh in front of heavens and in front of earth. This caused the KJV text to read, for as the new heavens and new earth. The third fatal error highlights the word translated two times as new, number 2319, Kadesh, but the evidence shows this is a translation impossibility in both cases. These errors are revealed by their attached suffixes. The first use of the word has the suffix, I don't know how to read Hebrew, so bear with me. That suffix which identifies the word as a plural noun. The word new is not a noun and cannot be under any circumstances a plural noun. Therefore, this word choice is hopelessly incorrect. Strikingly, the second time this word is given in the Hebrew text, the suffix identifies it as a singular noun. So let's apply the correct Hebrew word, number 2320, Kodesh, which is the noun new moon and is spelled exactly the same in Hebrew as number 2319, Kadesh. Now, both of the words with their suffixes work perfectly, and it reads, for according as the Shamayim, or heavens, the new moons, and the earth, the new moon that I fashioned and placed in order. The fourth fatal error is number 6440, Panyim, a plural word being wrongly applied, number 6434, Lapane, which is not a plural word form. Number 6434 is a perfect fit for the word pan. Then, by including the prefix and the suffix, you will have the phrase, for my chief cornerstone. In this fifth fatal error found in verse 23, the KJV only utilized the prefix and not the Hebrew word, number 1767, mi dahi. This word that is completely missing is the word abundance. It is this word that identifies which lunar phase is the true new moon and chief cornerstone of Yah's time system. The sixth fatal error is exactly the same as the one above, but because the translators ignored this word a second time, it punctuates a proactive attitude to cover up this word abundance. The second time this word is used, it identifies that the Sabbath is to be reckoned from the abundant new moon. But this truth about the Sabbath exposes the false calendar styles set up by both the rabbinical Pharisees and Romans alike. And so by necessity, they must camouflage it, causing it to simply disappear. The seventh fatal error is the removal of the word new moon, number 2320, Kodesh. The second time it was to be used, in its place, the word to another was interjected. While this technically means the same thing, there is an undermining of the importance placed upon the new moon. Similar to the one above, this eighth fatal error inserted the word to another to replace the word number 7676, Sabbath. This illustrates that the translators willfully chose a word that had no relation to the Hebrew text. The ninth fatal error is regarding the second use of the word number 2320, Kodesh, new moon, in verse 23. Both the prefix and the suffix were completely eliminated. This suffix comes with a command from Yah that defines you shall keep. So applying this to the sentence we get, and it shall come to pass from its abundance, waxed phase, new moon by new moon, you shall keep. The 10th fatal error is exactly like the ninth, but it applies to the second use of the word Sabbath, number 7676. The translators eliminated both the prefix and the suffix. No doubt this was imperative to protect their counterfeit calendars, because here again the suffix contains the command of Yah. From its abundance, referring to the waxed new moon, Sabbath by Sabbath, you shall keep. It is in this portion of the verse that the remarkable truth regarding how to locate the authentic and kadosh or sacred seventh-day Sabbaths becomes crystal clear. They are to be counted from the full new moon. Because the suffix defines that this Sabbath should be kept, makes it impossible to explain away the connection between the new moon and the Sabbath by saying from month to month or week to week. This 11th fatal error for number 935, Baal, utilized only a portion of the prefix shall, but entirely ignored the it or he that is part of the prefix, rendering he shall or it shall. We know this must be the word it, because it is being declared by Yah. Further, by ignoring the main word, the context and truth was lost, that the new moon shall lead all flesh in when to worship for new moon days, feast days, and seventh-day Sabbaths. The 12th fatal error, number 6440, Panay, is exactly like the fourth, but here the subject has shifted to when mankind is to worship Yah. Here the truth is provided by applying the correct word, which means according to my chief cornerstone. So the entire sentence is harmonized with the previous text. It shall lead all flesh to prostrate and worship, according to my chief cornerstone, declares Yah. Between these two verses of Isaiah 66, 22 through 23, the word new moon was removed 3 times, twice in verse 22 and once in verse 23. As it turns out, the focus of verse 22 is not on a new Shamayim or heaven and new quote unquote earth after all, but rather on an ongoing perpetual timekeeping model as seen from earth, and that is to continue into the millennial kingdom and beyond. The corruption of this verse is an all-out attack by the enemy of souls to hide the impressive importance of Yah's full new moon. Through these translation attacks, the Sabbath was caused to appear to harmonize with the modern continuous week, which cycles without end according to the Roman, Julian, Gregorian, witty calendar invention. It wasn't until I completed this detailed Hebrew word study on these verses in Isaiah 66, 22 through 23, that the magnitude of this calendar cover-up within the very pages of Scripture was clearly realized. These verses were slaughtered in every imaginable way for the purpose of removing 7 facts. The lunar astral line time perspective from Earth by night versus the lunar solar line time perspective from Earth by day. The authentic full new moon was placed in a specific order among the lunar phases at creation. 3. The full new moon was appointed as the chief cornerstone of time to rule together with the stars by night, as designed by the Creator and not the sun, the crescent moon, or the dark moon. The correct new moon establishes who the obedient followers of Yah Elohim will be when he returns and who their descendants are. From its abundance or waxed lunar phase, new moon by new moon you shall keep, identifies the new moon lunar phase as full. From its abundance, waxed lunar phase, Sabbath by Sabbath you shall keep. This identifies that the Sabbaths were designed to be counted from the full new moon each lunar month and were never intended to cycle without end. This full new moon shall lead all flesh to prostrate in worship to the eternal Yah alone, fulfilling its role as the chief cornerstone of Yah's Kodesh worship times. So I'm going to leave that at that. That's a really long article. So if you want to read it, the link is in the description, I believe. If not, I'll put it in there. This is the next article, the lost books of the Bible on the Enoch calendar. This is the Sefer.net blog by a Stephen Pigeon. I have recently heard from someone on the issue of the calendar, particularly the calculation set forth in Yavalim and Shinnach. Here are his comments. Since seeing your video on they got a lot of typos, the Sefer on YouTube and visiting your website, Sefer.net, I am well pleased to hear and have the opportunity to discuss the word of Yah with a lawyer. For I have been longing to discuss the finer points of the law with someone who I would be able to have an intelligent discussion with. Let's skip down. So firstly, from a scriptural viewpoint, your conclusion for following the moon to determine the beginning and the ending of the months violates the principles set forth in Genesis. Okay. So in Genesis, note that days are counted and evening and morning pass independent of the sun, moon, and stars' presence. Upon closer inspection of the creation account in Genesis, we see that the counting of days ends on Shabbat, thereby founding the week upon which the days of the year may be built. In the middle of this first week, we see the greater light, the lesser light, and the stars are created. This means that the days of the week are independent from the days of the month and the days of the year. And note as well that in Genesis, we are only told that the lights are markers for signs, seasons, days, and years. Yet we are not instructed on how to use these markers until and Jubilees and First Enoch. In the story of Noah, we are given a hint as to the average number of days per month. And the waters prevailed upon the earth 150 days. This is conclusive evidence that during these 5 months, each month consists of 30 days. But how to determine the total months in a year? First Chronicles 27:1 tells us, now the children of Israel after their number, which came in and went out month by month through all the months of the year, after their number, that is to say, the 12 children of Israel are the 12 months of the year. And yet we are missing the number of weeks in a year. So how to calculate this? If 1 week equals 7 days and there are 30 days per month, we multiply 7 until we get close to 30 days. Oop, lost my place. Okay, so Week 1 equals 7 days. 4 weeks times 7 days equals 28 days, or 4 weeks. Now add the 2 remaining days. 28 days plus 2 days equals 30 days, or 4 weeks and 2 days. Next, we multiply the sum above by the number of months in the year. 30 days times 12 months equals 360 days. 4 weeks and 2 days times 12 months equals 50 weeks and 4 days. We now have a rough draft of the calendar. 1 day equals evening and morning. 1 week equals 7 days. 1 month equals 30 days, or 4 weeks, and 2 days. 1 year equals 360 days, or 50 weeks, and 4 days, or 12 months. But wait, we are short 1 week and 3 days of 52 weeks. Why do we say there are only 52 weeks in a year? How do we know this to be true? Secondly, in Jubilee 6, we are given an account of the patriarchs, example of celebrating the feast throughout the year, and therefore their stories are why the facts were recorded on how to observe the feast throughout the year. Reading further, we see that the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th months are each separated by 3 months or 13 weeks or 90 days. So in total, we are told that there are 12 months or 52 weeks or 360 and 4 days in a year. Jubilee 6 closes with a warning that if we disturb this perfect timing that Yah has set in motion, then we will err with the timing of everything throughout the year, including when each season begins and ends. And as to the tracking of the sun, moon, and stars, we are even told that we will err in our calculation of the year by following the moon, seeing as it completes the year 10 days too soon. This section closes with the angel of presence telling Moses that when we reckon the year other than 360 and 4 days to add to or take away from Yah's letter of the law, then we will end up mixing the clean with the unclean, the holy with the unholy, the blood with the flesh, and go wrong as to the timing of the Shabbats and feasts and jubilees. Now that we know that there are indeed 52 weeks in a year, we are not told where the extra 1 week and 3 days comes from, nor are we told the number of days it takes that the sun, moon, and stars to complete their courses. Okay, so I am very aware of this calculation, and I do not disparage the words of Kanak. From a scientific point of view, we complete our orbit around the sun in 365.2 day cycle. Therefore, the Enochian calendar advances 1.2 days every year, which means that in 30 years, Pekah will be held in February. In 60 years, Pekah will be held in January, and so forth, until in a period of 365 years, the first of the year will be found in the same place in terms of the Earth's rotation and orbit around the sun. Many who read Enoch and who have adopted the calendar declare the first of the year to begin on the vernal equinox, declaring the day to be Wednesday. They do this in order to coordinate the Enochian calendar to what is now a 365.2 day year. Consider Psalm 81 and 3. Tekah, Bakadesh, Shofar, Bakasah, Ayam Ha-Kagnu. Blow the shofar on the dark new moon today on our feast. Now, some say that Kodesh does not mean moon because Yerek means moon. However, Yerak, its root, means month. 3391. Kodesh is of the same root as Kadash, as in Brit Kadasha, which means renewed. Although the moon is implied in the word Kadesh, the renewal, in the Hebrew language, it has always been considered to mean the renewal of the moon cycle. Considered for the purist, blow the shofar on the covered renewal today on our feast. Which covered renewal? Is this referring to a lunar eclipse, a solar eclipse? There are no feasts appointed on lunar or solar eclipses, so maybe this means at sundown. That will require the shofar to be blown daily. No, the implication is clearly the renewal of the moon cycle when the moon is darkened. There is but one feast of the seven Modaim, which is denoted on the first day of the month, which is Yom Teruah, the feast of the trumpet fanfare. Obviously, this is the feast when the shofar would be blown. Therefore, Teruah is the feast marked in this passage and proclaims the first day of the month, which begins with the renewal of the moon cycle, the dark moon. Now, the question is, how does the year begin? So you can see all the different confusions of the people. You go one place, you see one thing, you go to another, and it's something totally different. Some people believe you celebrate by the new moon, which is the dark moon, and then you have those who believe that you celebrate by the full moon. So, which one is it? We shall see. Enoch 77:15. It becomes precisely completed on the day the sun descends into the west and the moon ascends into the night in the east. This calculation describes the last month of the year when the sun descends to the west of due north. Yet the moon ascends, shines in its fullness to the east of due north. Following the vernal equinox, the sun sets to the east of due north and the moon ascends to the east of due north. When the moon ascends or shines in its fullness to the west and the sun also descends to the west, the autumnal equinox is reached. It is this verse which establishes the method by which the first month of the year is calculated. It is that month when the moon in its fullness arises to the east of due north, which is only after the vernal equinox. For those who demand that the calendar be calculated as a 364-day year, as established in Enoch, consider the discussion in chapter 71. The cipher of the revolutions of the luminaries of heaven, according to their respective classes, their respective powers, their respective periods, commence their progress and their respective months, which Uriel, the holy angel who was with me, explained to me, he who conducted them, the whole account of them, according to every year of the world forever, until a new work shall be effected, which will be eternal. A new work has been crafted in the heavens, a work which ultimately slowed the earth and brought us a greater year. The year now goes beyond 364 days because of two occurrences. Joshua 10:12 through 14. Then spoke Yah to Joshua in the day when Yah delivered up the children of Israel, and he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand you still upon Gibeon, and you, moon, in the valley of Ayalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Yasher? So the sun stood in the midst of heaven and hasted not to go down about a whole day. And there was no day like that before it or after it, that Yah hearkened unto the voice of a man, for Yah fought for Israel.
Yashar 88:63 through 65. And when they were smiting, the day was declining toward evening. And Joshua said in the sight of all the people, Sun, stand you still upon Gibeon, and you moon in the valley of Ayalan, until the nation shall have revenged itself upon its enemies. And Yah hearkened unto the voice of Joshua, and the sun stood still in the midst of the heavens. And it stood still 36 moments. And the moon also stood still, and hastened not to go down a whole day. And there was no day like that, before it or after it, that Yah hearkened to the voice of a man. In Isaiah 38:7 through 8, and this shall be a sign unto you from Yah, that Yah will do this thing that he has spoken. Behold, I will bring again the shadow of the degrees, which is gone down in the sundial of Ahaz, 10 degrees backward. So the sun returned 10 degrees, by which degrees it was gone down. Interesting. Now, in justifying the words of Yavelin and the words of Kanak to this equation, note that the calculation at the time it was given was exactly correct, because the Earth had a 364-day orbit, and further, the moon cycle, which is intermittent, comported with the numbered days at that time, so that there was no distinction between the calculations. Okay. Okay, now the books that I have. And all these books are in the description. The first book I'm going to read from is called Exploring the Moon Through Binoculars. Okay, A Month with the Moon, page 78, 77 through 78. Picture the full moon at its greatest altitude, when it stands high above the southern horizon, bisected by the celestial meridian. For generations, it has been customary to call the lunar limb toward the west half of the sky the western limb, and the limb toward the east half of the sky the eastern limb. North was up for observers in the northern hemisphere, and south was down. That was logical and simple. Of course, it meant that the Terminator moved across the moon's disk from west to east, but that didn't bother astronomers as they observed from the Earth, and no one else cared. It also meant that if man ever landed on the moon, he would find the sun rising in the west and setting in the east. That didn't bother astronomers either, not until the space age was well underway. The likelihood that men actually would land on the moon, coupled with the fact that both Earth and moon rotate on their axes in the same direction, indicated that the direction toward which the Terminator moves across the moon should be called west. just as it is on the Earth. Accordingly, the new coordinates are identical with those used on terrestrial maps. North is at the top, south is at the bottom, east is to the right, and west is to the left. Since we plan to explore the moon, we use the new coordinates and we use them on every chart and photograph in this book. On all identification charts that company photographs, the directions of the compass are shown since a few of the photographs have been cropped in such a way that north is not toward the top. When consulting other books, remember that older books use the old system and a few use both. It would facilitate your acquaintance with the moon if I could say to you, for example, that whenever the moon is 7 days old, you will find the important crater Al- Albid Albetchnius, bisected by the terminator and located one-third the distance from the south limb to the north limb. This is sometimes true, but I regret to report not always. The actual instant at which the moon reaches the exact age of 7 days may not take place until some hours after your observation, and Albegenius may be largely in darkness west of the terminator when you look for it. On the other hand, the moon may have reached its 7 day age some 18 hours prior to your observation. Okay, they getting a little deep. I just want the new moon. Okay, since our satellite arrives at the new moon position at varying intervals, we find corresponding variations in the position of the terminator at new moon. We are interested primarily in the position of the terminator with respect to the lunar surface features, and the terminator advances over the lunar surface at the essentially uniform rate of the moon's rotation, about 12.2 degrees per day. I wonder if the name of this device is where they got the name for the movie. Um, so, just as the combination of uniform rotation and non uniform revolution causes the liberation in longitude, that combination also causes the terminator to reach the position it should occupy at new moon, sometimes before and sometimes after the instant of new moon. This means that we must expect slight differences in the location of the terminator at the moment of new moon from one lunation to another. These differences account for part of our uncertainty as to whether or not Albitaginus, whatever, will appear exactly on the terminator when the moon is 7 days old. The rest of the uncertainty has to do with the time of day at which the lunation begins. The event of new moon may occur at any time of day from, say, 1 second after midnight to 1 second before next midnight. If, for example, it should occur at 7:43 a.m. on July 3rd, then the moon will be 2 days old on July 5th at 7:43 a.m. 10 days old on July 13th at 7:43 a.m., etc. Since the average length of the lunation is 29.530589 days, 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 2.8 seconds. The moon is likely to reach the new phase next at an entirely different hour of the day, and that new hour will determine the exact time of its daily anniversaries during the next lunation. The reason why this event can take place at any time of day is, of course, that the fundamental cycles involve the revolution period of the moon and the rotation period of the earth are incom- incommensurable. In such instances, the most probable time of recurrence is the midpoint of the measuring cycle used, the day in this case, If you have an almanac that gives the hour and minute of new moon as well as the day of the month, you readily can demonstrate this fact. Disregard the dates and average the times of day for the event through the whole year. Okay. The next book is The World of the American Indian, which is also located in the description. So, page 211. See if I can get this up here. Okay, so after herring spawn moon, which you see on the screen, March, in the Nootka calendar came wild goose moon, when geese, ducks, and other waterfowl clogged the Pacific flyway, winging north for nesting. Then it was getting ready for whaling moon. The Nootka stood out as the most intrepid sea hunters of the North Pacific coast. Their territory was the west side of Vancouver Island. A colonial offshoot, the Maka, had migrated south to the tip of the Olympic Peninsula before the advent of the white man, and the Maka also were renowned whalers. A search for better sea hunting may, in fact, have motivated their southward move. Page 214. Mere humans could not expect to overcome so mighty an animal as the whale without supernatural help. Regardless of his skill, no responsible chief took blubber and glory for granted. Months in advance, he and the first lady began ritual training to win cooperation of the whale spirits. Continents, icy baths at night during the waxing moon or the full moon, and not eating the flesh of land animals. A few days before the hunt, crewmen also took up the ritual. If the hunt proved unsuccessful or unduly arduous, it meant that someone had been weak, wanton, or lazy and had broken training. Page 220. Omen. These are the Hamasaka people. E-M-A-S-A-K-A. So, in fine weather, the men went naked except for ornaments. Women wore skirts of vegetable fiber that did not lose shape when wet and dried quickly. The most successful people in Northwest Coast society were quite often, the cleanest. Ritual bathing was a way of attaining spirit power for any important undertaking, including curing the sick. The seeker ate sparingly, practiced continence, and during the waxing moon or the new moon, bathed in icy water, singing, praying, and scouring the body with branches to rid it of human taint. And these are some of the descendants of those people. Page 223. Smoke, song, and dancing feet allay a catastrophe in the skies as a monster slowly swallows the moon during an eclipse. Kwaikudu villagers raise a clamor beside a smoldering fire meant to make the monster sneeze and disgorge its lunar meal. Page 242. Fascinating faces of animals, mythical monsters, and real people enhance treasures from the Lingit tribe. The carver's art went to war with the Wari chief, who hid his own vulnerable head inside a burly helmet. Clan crest adorn a wealth symbol inflated in value each time it changed hands, and other ritual and useful objects. A favorite totemic figure was Wily Raven, culture hero whose trickery put sun, moon, and stars in the sky and set a chaotic world in order. And this is the mask that's in the book. Okay, page 297. This is the Oglala. So only this Alala Sui or Su knows what his mind and faith have summoned to this hill. His pipe pointed skyward, the skull of the life-giving buffalo at his feet, he evokes the mystique of the vision quest. Rites varied among tribes, but the purpose ever was the same, a plea, a seeking for an infusion of supernatural powers. They came through the medium of animals and natural forces. For an Oglala, perhaps a buffalo would bring them. And in thanks, a man prayed to Wakantanka, the great mystery. You have taught us your will through a four-legged one, so that your people may walk the sacred path. Indians who described the vision quest to whites could recount its steps. Purify mind and body by passing through the smoke of pine needles. Go to a hilltop. Stay for days, fasting, praying to the powers of earth and sky, to the grandfather of all. But the experience itself, the coming and awaking vision of a power in the guise of man or animal, was beyond the reach of words. Even the man who had the vision might go to elders for interpretation. To a crow, A vision of the sun was rare. It augured great power as a medicine man, but a short life. The sun was chief of sky beings, his helper the eagle. The moon, which appeared as male or female, offered long life. Moon's helper was the owl. The skies was thunder. The evening stars, the buffalo. Earth, chief of all trees and mother of four-legged animals, was aided by rats, snakes, and mice. Any chief or helper might be the benefactor, the bringer of the power that would mold a life. The buffalo hide shield. It's not the one in the book, but it's similar to this one. So, towering image of Earth touching sky, Chief Mountain in Glacier National Park called men whose quest for visions took them to a lofty stage. Others sought bare hilltops, lakesides, sites where they could be alone with their searching souls. What they found, they transformed into the tangible, a medicine bundle, a medicine shield. The bundle contained a miscellany of objects: animal skins, sacred stones, feathers related to a vision. Only its owner could fully delve its mysteries, but his shield proclaimed his vision. The power it radiated was beyond that which warded off arrows. He did not always take his medicine shield to war. He might wear miniatures of it about his neck or in his hair. Rotten Belly, a crow chief, is said to have got his below from Thunderbird, though the sexless figure suggests the moon. Cloth, red, the color of life, drapes a crane's head and body, eagle's feather, deer's tail. He believed the shield guided him in war. Legend says on the eve of battle in 1834, it told him he would die. History records his death in that year. And the last page, 307. Who are these? These are the Amaha. Ani. Okay, so preparations for the dance. This is the Blackfoot. The leading role was played by a woman known as the medicine woman of the Sundance. She had solemnly vowed to perform the mission if a loved one survived some illness or peril. Only a virtuous woman could qualify to conduct the sacred rites. Preparations for the dance began in the spring when a messenger went from the medicine woman's camp to inform other bands of her promise. In early summer, when the bands assembled for the tribal buffalo hunt, relatives of the medicine woman collected bull buffalo tongues. Small pieces later were distributed to certain women. Holding the pieces facing the setting sun, the women prayed for the welfare of their loved ones and then buried the morsels. The climax of the sun dance came with the women's ritual and the building of a medicine lodge. Its center pole, a tree chopped down by a man who had killed an enemy, was lowered into a hole at the direction of the medicine woman. If the pole did not stand erect, she would be accused of not being as virtuous as she said she was. When the poll was up, her role ended, and the men of the tribe began a round of dances and ceremonies. Young men who had made vows to the sun were presented in the medicine lodge to fulfill them. In 1947, I heard such a vow came from the lips of an old blood Indian named Heavyhead. He was telling me about the sun dance, and he began by recalling how and when he had made his promise to the sun. About to enter an enemy camp to steal a horse, he had looked up by the moonlit sky and prayed, "If I have good luck and get home safely, I shall be tortured at the Sundance." When he told me his story, 6 decades after he lived it, he still bore the scars of his ordeal. And that's that. Let's see. The next book I will be reading from is called On Superstitions Connected with the History and Practice of Medicine and Surgery. And this is the chapter on astrology. Okay. If either Sextus Empiricus, Pius Mirandula, Sextus ab Heminga, Parius Erastus Chambers have so far prevailed with any man that he will attribute no virtue at all to the heavens or to sun or moon more than he doth to their signs at an innkeeper's post or tradesman's shop, or generally condemn all astrological aphorisms approved by experience. I refer to him, Belantius, Parabonis, and that's Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. So, alchemy, judicial astrology, and natural magic are all intimately associated together. Judicial astrology, according to Ashmole, is the key of natural magic. In natural magic, the door that leads to this bless the philosopher's stone in the employment of certain characters, letters, words, or figures as talismans. To avert or conquer disease, it is pretended that they have been derived from the various appearances to be observed upon certain plants, roots, seeds, fruits, etc., even upon stones, flints, and other bodies. These figures, the astrologers contend, are the evidence of providence, and not the result of chance, and directed to our good, being the characters and figures of those stars by whom they are principally governed and endowed with particular virtues. The soul of the world, says Ashmole, is not confined, nor the celestial influences limited, but can communicate their virtues alike to things artificially made as well as naturally generated, from which it is deducted as necessary that a fit election must be built up from the foundation of astrology suitable to the nature of the operation proposed to be effected, and that the stars finding a figure aptly disposed for receiving them, they forthwith impress their virtue, which they retaining do afterwards operate in that which they find to be symbol. Talismans, or the doctrine of signatures, may therefore be said to have taken their origin from a belief that medicinal substances bore upon their external surfaces the properties or virtues they possessed, impressed upon them by planetary influence. The connection of the properties of substances with their color is also an opinion of great antiquity. White was regarded as refrigerant, red as hot. Hence, cold and hot qualities were attributed to different medicines. This opinion led to serious errors in practice. Red flowers were given for disorders of the sanguiferous system, yellow ones for those of the biliary secretion, etc. We find that in smallpox, red bed coverings were employed with the view of bringing the pustules to the surface of the body. The bed furniture and hangings were very commonly of a red color. Red substances were to be looked upon by the patient. Burnt people, pomegranate seeds, mulberries, or other red ingredients were dissolved in their drink. In short, as Avicenna contended that red bodies moved the blood, everything of a red color was employed in these cases. John of Gaddesden, physician to Edward II, directs his patients to be wrapped up in scarlet dresses. And he says that when the son of the renowned King of England, Edward II, lay sick of the smallpox, I took care that everything around the bed should be of a red color, which succeeded so completely that the prince was restored to perfect health without a vestige of a pustule remaining. Wraxall, in his memoirs, says that the Emperor Francis I, when infected with the smallpox, was rolled up in a scarlet cloth by order of his physician so late as 1765 when he died. Camper, History of Japan, says that when any of the emperor's children are attacked with the smallpox, not only the chamber and bed are covered with red hangings, but all persons who approach the sick prince must be clad in scarlet gowns. Flannel dyed 9 times in blue was held to be efficacious in the removal of glandular swellings. The rising and setting of the stars, the eclipses of the sun and moon, the appearance of comets or other fiery meteors, the aspects, conjunctions, and oppositions of the planets have all been considered to be intimately influential in the production as in the relief of diseases. Fracastorius, a poet and physician, sought the causes of diseases in the heavens. Certain positions of the celestial bodies he considered to be of malignant influence, by which contagious disorders were produced. A conjunction of many stars under the large fixed stars predicted a contagion. Falling stars and comets denoted putrefaction. The Jesuit Kircher, after a strict examination of almanacs and astrological tables, contended that putrid diseases had always prevailed at those times when the planet Mars and Saturn were in conjunction. He therefore inferred that those two planets emitted very deadly exhalations which infected the air and all terrestrial productions with a putrescent tendency. And I'm sure it doesn't help with them plummeting and raping the earth and killing everything natural. So he therefore inferred that these two planets emitted very deadly exhalations which infected the air and all terrestrial productions with a putrescent tendency. When myriads of animalcules were instantly generated, and the plague, the smallpox, the measles, or some other putrid fevers became inevitable. Hence, COVID. Mr. Fraser notices the superstitious belief of the natives of Khorasan in the powers of the celestial bodies. And these are the Persian Arabs or Arabs in Khorasan. They're a group of Arabs who immigrated to Khorasan province, Iran during the Abbasid Caliphate 750 through 1258. Most belong to the tribes of Shebani, and Azdi, and only a few speak Khorasani Arabic. Let's see if we can find some images. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and says they attributed the ravages of the cholera with which they were visited to the influence of the star Canopus, called by the Persians and Arabians Zohel. And this became visible at this time above the horizon a little before sunrise. Ooh, I like it. That's my color. Um, the Druids are known to have introduced many superstitions in connection with the moon, some of which have descended to the present day. Animals were killed, seeds were sown, plants were gathered, timber was felled, voyages were undertaken, new garments were put on, the hair was cut only at particular periods of the moon. The early English almanacs abound with reference to its condition. Brand quotes from the husbandman's practice or prognostication forever, London 1664, the following curious passage: good to purge with electuaries the moon in Cancer, with pills the moon in Pisces, with potions the moon in Virgo. Good to take vomits, the moon being in Taurus, Virgo, or the latter part of Sagittarius. To purge the head by sneezing, the moon being in Cancer, Leo, or Virgo, to stop fluxes and rheums. The moon being in Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn. To bathe when the moon is in Cancer, Libra, Aquarius, or Pisces. To cut their hair off the head or beard when the moon is in Libra, Sagittarius, Aquarius, or Pisces. Brief observations is in husbandry: set, sow seeds, graft, and plant, the moon being in Taurus, Virgo, or in Capricorn, and all kind of corn in Cancer. Graft in March at the moon's increase, she being in Taurus or Capricorn. Burton tells us that St. John's wort gathered on a Friday in the horn of Jupiter when it comes to his effectual operation, that is, about the full moon in July. So gathered and borne or hung about the neck will mightily help melancholy and drive away fantastical spirits. The influence of the moon in various diseases, particularly those of a pestilential character, has been much remarked by medical practitioners in tropical regions. Dr. Balfour, who for a long time resided at Calcutta, an accurate and intelligent observer of the diseases which occur in hot climates, is generally considered to have satisfactorily established the influence of the moon in cases of fever, and he was induced during a practice of 14 years in the East to pay particular attention to its revolutions in the treatment of these diseases. He found the accession of fever to take place during the 3 days which either precede or follow the full moon. And he has endeavored to show that at the time of the equinoxes, an additional power is added to the lunar influence exercised on the human frame. These opinions have met with support and received confirmation from the practice and researches of Lind and Bingle, of Cleghorn in Minorca, of Fontana in Italy, of Jackson in Jamaica, of Gillespie at St. Lucia, of Bale in Persia, and of Annalette Ainsley in Madras. Dr. Moseley carried his opinions with respect to the influence of the moon on mankind to a ridiculous extreme, and affirmed that almost all people of extreme age died at the new or at the full moon. Aristotle ascribes many of the derangements of females to the decrease of the moon. Galen says all animals born when the moon is falciform are weak and feeble and short-lived, whilst those born at the full are the contrary. Lord Bacon invariably fell into a syncope during a lunar eclipse. Vegetable substances, as well as animals, have always been considered to be greatly under the influence of the moon. It was formerly deemed essential in the cure of diseases to be acquainted with astronomy. And Sir George Ripley, in his Compound of Alchemy, tells us that a good physician, whoso intended to be, our lower astronomy him needeth well to know, and after that to learn well urine in a glass to see, and if it need to be shaft, the fry to blow, then wittily it by divers ways to throw. And after the call to make a medicine blithe, truly telling the infirmities all on a row, who thus can do by his physique is like to thrive. Excuse me. Ashmole declares psychic to be a divine science, even God's theology. For the Almighty wrote his scripture in that language before he made Adam to read it. The 10 fathers before the flood and those that followed, together with Moses and Solomon, were the great physicians in former ages who bequeathed their heavenly knowledges of natural helps to those they judged as well worthy in honesty and industry, as capable thereof. And from their piercing beams, all nations enlightened their tapers. Abraham brought it out of Chaldea and bestowed much thereof upon Egypt, and thence a refulgent beam glanced into Greece. Hippocrates and Galen held a knowledge of astronomy to be essential to physicians. The latter declares all who are ignorant of it to be no better than homicides. Homicidus medicos astrologiae ignoros. By astronomy, these ancient physicians meant astrology. Chaucer, in his picture of a good physician, says, with us there was a doctor of physique. In all the world was there none him like. To speak of physique and of surgery, for he was grounded in astronomy. He kept his patients a full great deal in hours by his magic natural. Well could he fortune the ascendant of his magic for his patients. Fabian Withers, speaking of physicians, declares, so far are they distant from the true knowledge of psychic, which are ignorant of astrology, that they ought not rightly to be called physicians, but deceivers. For it hath, says he, been many times experimented and proved that which many physicians could not cure or remedy with their greatest and strongest medicines, the astronomer had brought to pass with one simple herb by observing the moving of the signs. The virtues of herbs were considered to be according to the influence of the planet under which they were sown or gathered. Black hellebore was to be plucked, not cut, and this with the right hand, which was then to be covered with a portion of the robe and secretly conveyed to the left hand. The person gathering it was also to be clad in white, to be barefooted, and to offer a sacrifice of bread and wine. Verbena or vervain was to be gathered at the rising of the dog star, when neither sun nor moon shone, an expiatory sacrifice of fruit and honey having been previously offered to the earth. Hence arose its power to render the possessor invulnerable, to cure fevers, to eradicate poison, and to conciliate friendship. The mistletoe was to be cut with a golden knife, and when the moon should be only 6 days old. Uncommon events in barbarous ages were attributed to supernatural agency. Hence, have arisen the connection of the names of gods and goddesses with various productions of the earth, which have been employed as medicinal agents. The ivy was sacred to Osiris and to Bacchus, the pine to Neptune, the herb Mercury to Hermes, black hellebore to Melampus, centuary to Chiron, the laurel to Alorus, the artemisia to Diana, the malepholium to Achilles, the hyacinth to Ajax, the squill to Epimenes. Diseases having been referred to the exercise of supernatural influence, a variety of mysterious rites would be performed to remove them. Superstition is the natural offspring of fear. In savage nations, the physicians, if they may be so called, are all conjurers and wizards, persons supposed to be gifted either with divine or demoniacal natures. Incantations, sorcery, jugglery of all kinds, engrafted probably in many cases upon enthusiasm, together with ignorance, supply the place of science to which they are utter strangers. Whatever is beyond their sagacity is assigned to invisible agency. Pliny calls magic the offspring of medicine and says that after having fortified itself with the power of astrology, it borrowed all its splendor and authority from religion. And now this is Every Man's Talmud. Just looking for a picture. So the planetary influence of the moon and the eclipse of the moon. Pages 281 and 282. So the influence of the time of birth upon the character and fate of the individual is described in some detail. One born on a Sunday will be wholly good or wholly bad, because on that day light and darkness were created. One born on Monday will be bad tempered, because on that day the waters were divided. One born on a Tuesday will be rich and lustful, because on that day the herbage was created. One born on Wednesday will be wise and of retentive memory, because on that day the luminaries were suspended in the firmament. One born on Thursday will be benevolent, because on that day fish and birds were created. One born on Friday will be active, or according to another version, zealous to perform the precepts. One born on the Shabbat will die on the Sabbath, because on his account the holy day was profaned. Another rabbi expressed the opinion that not the planet of the day of birth determines a person's destiny, but the planet of the hour. One who is born under the influence of the sun will be a distinguished man, will eat and drink of his own. His secrets will be revealed, and if he should venture to steal, he will not succeed. One who is born under the influence of Venus will be rich and lustful, because fire was born through that constellation. One who is born under the influence of Mercury will be of retentive memory and wise, because it is the scribe attendant upon the sun. One who is born under the influence of the moon will be ailing, will build and destroy, and again destroy and build, will eat and drink not of his own, his secrets will be concealed, and if he should venture to steal, he will succeed. One who is born One who is born under the influence of Saturn will be a man whose pains will fail, but others declare that all designs against him will fail. One who is born under the influence of Jupiter will be righteous. One who is born under the influence of Mars will be a shedder of blood. Another rabbi declared he will be either a cupper, a butcher, or a circumciser. So closely is a man's destiny bound up with his constellation that if he experiences the sensation of fear, although he may not see the cause of it, his planet does perceive it. What is his remedy? Let him recite the Shema. And if he's standing in an unclean place, let him move away a distance of 4 cubits, or let him say, the goat in the slaughterhouse is plumper than I. Another belief was that the name of a person affects his career. Like the other peoples of antiquity, the Jews interpreted an eclipse as a manifestation of divine anger. The rabbis taught the eclipse of the sun is a bad omen for the whole world. A parable. To what is the matter like? To a human king who made a banquet for his servants and placed a lamp before them. When he became angry with them, he ordered a slave to remove the lamp and leave them in darkness. As long as the planets are in eclipse, it is a bad omen for the enemies of Israel, because they are inured to calamities. A parable. When a teacher enters the classroom with a strap in his hand, who becomes perturbed? The pupil, who is accustomed to receiving a thrashing every day. The eclipse of the sun is a bad omen for the Gentile peoples of the world. The eclipse of the moon is a bad omen for the enemies of Israel, because Israel fixes the calendar by the moon and the Gentiles by the sun. If the eclipse occurs in the east, it is a bad omen for those who dwell in the east. If it occurs in the west, it is a bad omen for those who dwell in the west. If it occurs in the center of the heaven, it is a bad omen for the whole world. If its face becomes the color of blood, the sword is about to befall the world. If it becomes the color of a sack, gray, the arrows of famine are about to befall the world. If it becomes like both, the sword and arrows of famine are about to befall the world. If the eclipse takes place at the sun's setting, the calamity delays to come. If at its rising the calamity hastens to come, but some authorities reverse the interpretation. There is no nation smitten without its deities being smitten along with it, as it is said, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. Exodus 12. But when Israel performs the will of the omnipresent, he has no cause to fear any of these things, as it is said, thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the nations, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. for the nations are dismayed at them. Jeremiah 2. The nations, but not Israel, are dismayed at them. On account of 4 reasons is the sun eclipsed: because of the president of a court of law who dies and a fitting funeral oration is not pronounced over him; because of a maiden who is being assaulted in an inhabited place and nobody comes to her rescue; because of pederasty; and because of 2 brothers whose blood is shed at the same time. On account of 4 things are the planets eclipsed: forgers of documents, perjurers, those who rear small animals in the land of Israel, and those who cut down fine trees. Some of the rabbis appreciated the fact that belief in planetary influence and astrology was incompatible with the doctrine of free will, which is the foundation of ethics. They accordingly put forward a half-hearted compromise in the suggestion: there is no reality in divination, but there is in signs. A sign is a real thing. What they meant may be understood from these examples. He who sneezes during prayer should regard it as a bad omen. If one errs while saying his prayer, it is a bad omen for him and should be acting as precentor. It is a bad omen for those who deputed him, since a man's deputy is similar to himself. They declared concerning our Kanina, the Dosa, that when praying on behalf of the sick, he would say, "This one will live, that one will die." They asked him, "How do you know?" He replied, "If my prayer is fluent in my mouth, I know that he is accepted, but if not, I know that he is rejected." And we're going to leave that at that. These Jewish people crazy. And the last book I'm going to read out of today, because I got to go get some vitamin D. This is the book, The Last 2 Million Years, also in the description. So this is page 239. New Learning in an Age of Kings, AD 1600 through 1762. As monarchs wielded absolute power, philosophers and scientists used reason and experiment to unravel the laws of the universe. After 30 years of religious wars, large areas of the Holy Roman Empire were divided among new secular states. After the Great Fire, the example of glitter and elegance set by the court of Louis was followed in England after the restoration in 1660 of Charles II. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so for more than 1,000 years after the fall of Rome, Europe was held together by a concept of order based on a largely feudal society united by the bonds of religion. During the 200 years after the Reformation, however, all this was to change. The traditional power structure of Europe was challenged from all sides and gradually collapsed, finally to expire in the bloodbath of the French Revolution. The first challenge came from a spate of scientific discoveries at the start of the 17th century. New philosophers, scientists demonstrated that the universe could be understood by the gathering of information and the application of reason. Their theories challenged the teachings of the Christian church, which had been the basis of European civilization for 1,000 years, and placed in doubt the very existence of God. Men were urged to think for themselves and to have the courage to reject established authority. The educated middle class, which was increasing as commerce grew, adopted the spirit of skepticism from the philosophers and turned it into a movement that was to culminate in revolution. The year 1609 saw two events which marked the birth of modern science and introduced a source of disruption to the social fabric of Europe. Johannes Kepler, a German astronomer, formulated the theory that the planets move round the sun in ellipses rather than in perfect circles, and that the time taken to complete their revolutions varies according to their average distance from the sun. The new laws of planetary motion, which Kepler drew up, destroyed the old belief that the universe was made up of heavenly bodies moving in perfect circles and at uniform speeds. In the same year, Galilei in Padua made the first astronomical telescope, which enabled him to study the movement of the planets. I know that they focus a lot on the sun. I'm really looking for the moon and the new moon. Let's see. 294. Okay, this is page 294 called The Secrets of the Universe. The instruments of mathematical inquiry. So this picture up on the screen, God the Father plans the architecture of his universe with a pair of dividers. An illustration from a 13th century French Bible sets the instruments of mathematical inquiry against the background of medieval faith. So the astronomers, after the breakup of the Roman Empire, the study of the heavens languished in Europe. Even after learning revived, scientific inquiries were inhibited by the dogmatic teachings of the Catholic Church. But in the Middle East, Muslim astronomers continued their researches in great observatories at Damascus, Alexandria, and especially at Baghdad. Arab knowledge of the sciences ultimately flowed westwards back to Europe and east to India and China. So, man is a thinking animal, and the most intriguing set of questions he has ever set himself to think about are those concerned with the nature of life. How was the universe created? When did life begin? What is the difference between living and non living, between mind and matter? For long ages, mankind's first preoccupation was the struggle for survival. Men sought no explanation for the working of natural forces which affected their lives, but accepted that they were controlled by gods who ruled every aspect of their destiny. If a volcano erupted, the gods were angry. If a man prospered in love or war, the gods had favored him. Even man's earliest deliberate observations of the heavens had a severely practical purpose, that of building up a calendar of the seasons to help him tell when to plant and harvest his crops. There was still no attempt to draw conclusions from his study or nature of nature. Okay. Then page 301, discovering discoveries in outer space, studying the heavens. All right, I said that was my last book, but one more. This is Exploring the Unexplained, the World's Greatest Marvels, Mysteries, and Myths by the editors of Time magazine. This is page 38, Stargazing's Twilight. So, astrology is the single most influential pseudoscience in human history. Its influence is everywhere, from the ancient pyramids of Egypt to the plays of Shakespeare to Ronald Reagan's White House. Across the globe, millions of people who consider themselves immune to the superstition wouldn't think of starting their day without consulting a newspaper or online horoscope. Battles have been won and lost, and children have been conceived based on the alignment of the stars. And in modern day India, wedding planners complain that too many nuptials are scheduled for a small number of days, those identified as auspicious by the heavens. Yet mainstream scientists, without exceptions, say astrology is utterly bogus, and even its proponents struggle to explain how the position of celestial bodies at our birth could possibly influence our personalities, much less our destinies. Yet, who among us has not consulted a horoscope only to find that our character traits reflect precisely the qualities put forth by the astrologers? Tidy Virgo, bull-headed Taurus, sexy Scorpio, unpredictable Gemini. The notion that our fate may be tangled up in the stars is present in almost all human cultures and dates from mankind's earliest days. The pyramids, Chamber tombs and ancient megaliths of ancient history were built to align with the heavens. Yet, as science has replaced superstition in man's affairs, astrology's influence has, so to speak, entered retrograde. In its first manifestation, man believed the stars and planets played a direct role in human affairs, and the first astrologers were priest magicians of enormous power. By the Middle Ages, astrologers no longer believed the stars controlled our destinies, but thought signs and portents involving human affairs could be read in the heavens. Today, the powers claimed for astrology are much diminished, and the discipline is valued by most of its users for the insights it is believed to offer into personality types. Yet, astrology made a vital contribution to the history of science, for it led directly to the serious study of astronomy. A number of Renaissance astrologers, Tycho Brahe, Nicholas Copernicus, Johannes Kepler, became pioneering astronomers. Their desire to penetrate the gauze of the heavens helped advance our knowledge of outer space in revolutionary ways. Weather, too, weather too was long thought to be dictated by stars, meteors, and planets. And when today's forecasters are filling their oats, they like to be called meteorologists. Because astrology has played so significant a role in human history, its influence is everywhere in society, language, and arts, perhaps second only to that of religion. A study of astrology takes us on a whirlwind tour through human culture. Mesopotamian stargazers gave us the zodiac, and the three magi, astrologer priests who witnessed Christ's birth. Anyway, Egyptians created the idea of the horoscope. The Greeks gave us the constellations, the organizing units of European astrology, and their fanciful, evocative names. However, much astrology has enriched our history, poetry, and language. It is, scientific terms, utter bunk. In a shattering 1995 attack on astrology, printed in Britain's independent newspaper, Richard Dawkins, the British scientist and writer who is an especially avid foe of pseudoscience, recalled an anecdote about film director Otto Preminger, an enthusiast of astrology, once approached the director on a movie set and inquired, "Gee, Mr. Preminger, what sign are you?" The famed grouch flashed an icy glare and replied, "I am a do not disturb sign." Star power. Worlds of wonder in the heavens, the constellations named by the Greeks continue to inform modern astrology. Above, the constellations of the southern hemisphere are on the left, the northern hemisphere on the right. In these maps painted by Briton James Thornhill in 1725, the main picture of a distant star cluster was taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. Trying to find the picture on the book if anybody's ever did a natal chart. You know what that looked like. So very interesting information. I really enjoyed the readings. Um, Again, the books that we've been reading from today are located in the description box. Don't forget to donate to the ministry, Sister for Sisters, Cash App, PayPal. It's all in the description. Stay tuned. Coming up, I will be trying to get this big presentation ready. A tale of two fish, meat eating madness. We're just going through from beginning to end and discussing what's going on in the world with the sacrifices, the bloodshed, the wars and the killing, and what effects does all of this stuff have on, the people of the world. So stay tuned. Thanks again for listening. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to inbox me or send me an email, sisterforsisters@gmail.com. Love you all to life and light. Have a wonderful rest of your day.